So I believe I'm sharing my screen. Righto, I'm just going to make this full screen. Okay, so bit of a segue on this one. What I'm actually going to be speaking about is how to hire a functional consultant. So I am going to tell you a little bit about certifications as well, but just to introduce myself to everybody on the stream. So I'm a solution architect in Sydney, but as some of you might be able to tell via my accent, I'm via London. So I used to be a functional consultant. I did that for about 10 years, and I started out on version 4 of Dynamics. And I've also done quite a bit of work in professional development, so certification, as Mohit mentioned, leading graduates and mentoring. So what I'm going to be talking about is a bit of a hot topic at the moment, which is how to get the right functional consultant for your business. And if you're looking for work, how to make sure that you're at the top of the list for getting hired. So why are we talking about this? So as everybody knows at the moment, Microsoft is booming. So the market is huge for functional consultants at the moment, especially in CE. So if you're looking for work, there's a lot of choice out there at the moment. To make sure you know what people are looking for, I'm going to tell you about that. And as a company, what you need to know is getting the right person. So functional consultant covers a multitude of things. We've got to determine what that means for you before you can hire the right person. Okie dokie. So, functional consultants. The first thing we have to define is what we mean by a functional consultant. So, lots of different flavors of what this job means. So, if we start out, what are some of the core skills that we're looking for in a functional consultant? So, starting off on the left then, the main one we want to be thinking about is general consulting. So this applies to us as IT consultants in the Microsoft space. It applies to accountants. It applies to lawyers. This is your general soft skills. So being able to facilitate workshops with clients, being able to manage stakeholders, being able to assist salespeople, estimating work, presenting, documentation. This is a common skill in every functional consultant. Then we've got Dynamics CE. So we've got to know all about the first-party apps on the CE side. So you've got your standard big four. We've got sales, customer service, marketing, field service. But then we've also got the new ones like customer voice, customer insights, and there's many more if we count in all the add-ins as well. So bearing in mind, it's very rare to get a person that knows everything about everything, but mastery of one or two of those apps, even 2 or 3, is an absolute must for doing this job. Okay, next one, Power Platform. So it's impossible to separate out being a CE consultant from knowing Power Platform now. So again, probably not going to get someone who's a master of all the Power Platform applications. So Power Automate, Power BI, Canvas apps, Power Virtual Agents. But a functional consultant has to know what all these things do, what the functions of them are, and how they fit into a wider CE solution. So where I would use a Canvas app, where I would use a Power Virtual Agent, how these add on to customer service and marketing, and how a customer can make the best use of having everything together. Okay, so last 2, standard work ethic. So being a consultant is a difficult job. We've got to wear lots of different hats. And when you're hiring for someone and when you're being hired, what people want to know is that you can have these skills. So you've got to be able to work on your own, but you've also got to be able to work in a team. People have got to know that you're self-motivated and you're going to go and learn by yourself. You're going to work by yourself. You're going to meet your own deadlines. And also they know you've got to be able to work hard. All right, so last one, common, sparkle. So this is what we do as consultants, right? We're able to talk to people. We're able to explain concepts. We bring people along with us. We sell the vision of Microsoft, and we explain solutions to people. So we've also got to be able to lead a team, and hopefully we're fun to work with. All right, so lastly, what are the extra things that we can have on a functional consultant? So last slide, we had all the standard stuff. What are some of the extras that a business might be looking for? So first one, leadership. So that comes with experience as a functional consultant. So if you've been doing this for a few years, you've probably been in a situation where you're leading a team, but that might be a team for design. It might be a team for delivery. Okay, so next one, community recognition. So quite a few of us speak in community events. People know who we are. We go and talk about stuff. We know what's going on. That's really valuable, especially things like MVPs. So that can be really valuable to the business that you go and work for. All right, sales. So pretty much every consultant is going to need to know a little bit about pre-sales. So being able to assist a salesperson with estimation or an idea about solutions, but actually being able to sell yourself is sometimes needed in this job. All right, so ERP experience. So I'm talking about CE, functional consultants at the moment, but you get the odd person like Mohit who knows both CE and ERP at the same time. So it will be rare that you get a person that spans both of those things because they're very different, but sometimes a business will need you to straddle both. All right, so domain knowledge. Some businesses focus very much on a particular industry. So for instance, law or healthcare or financial services. And in that instance, if you've done a lot of projects that center around that domain, that can be very useful. It can help you get a job in a specialist area. And last one, coding. So functional consultants, we've got to know how to configure. So we've got to know how to build our model-driven apps and create our Canvas apps and, add our business rules. But sometimes you're going to want people that will straddle a little bit of the functional and the technical consultant. So consider if you do need coding in your functional consultants, how much do you need? So do you need someone that knows everything that there is to know about PowerFX or JavaScript, which is the more lower end of the low code? Or do you need someone that's a real pro coder? So do you need someone that can jump on and write you a plugin in C#? So every one of these kind of 6 little sprinkled extras is going to mean that you're firstly going to hire someone who wants more money because each of these things come with a little bit more of experience. But also, if you're watching this thinking about jobs, look at these and see if any of these are you. This is an extra tick that you've got in your box, and know how much you're worth if you have these. Okay, so next up, how do we screen? Okay, so when we've got to the point that we know we want to hire, the first thing we have to do as a business is define who that is that we want. Okay, so we take those core functional consultant skills and then we add to them. So your business will define what you need out of your functional consultant. So do you need someone that helps with sales? Do you need someone that's going to be configuring all day? Do you need someone that knows something about a specific domain? So when you have that list, it's really important to create this as a checklist and to prioritize every one of those points. So bear in mind that it's going to be pretty rare that you'll get someone that meets everything you want. So make sure that you prioritize and make sure that you rate and stick to that. Okay, so once you've got your checklist, really important that you go out and benchmark your salaries based on that. Okay, so go and talk to recruiters, go and look at other jobs. Make sure you've got a realistic expectation of how much so much with that skills is actually going to cost you. Okay, then think about experience. So you need someone that has all those skills. How much of them? How long do you need them to have been working in the industry? Can you be looking at a junior staff member? And if you can, do you have the resources to grow them and help support them in their development? Okay, last one. Make sure you consider the mix of people that you've already got working for you. So it's really important not only that you get the right skill set to fit in and enhance your existing team, but also the right personality. Okay, so if you're a person looking for a job, first of all, you've got to know what skills you have. So when you're looking through these job descriptions, be ticking off the ones that you have. And when you find one of those skills that you match, make sure you have something to back that up. So when a recruiter calls you to screen you, make sure you say, so I know about the customer service application and I put it in this project, or I've used Power Virtual Agents before. This is one that I built and this is what I know. So make sure you back up your skills with examples. Okay, so on the other hand, though, don't be scared to go for a role that you don't match exactly. So if you have 8 out of the 10 things that they're matching, most companies are still going to want to speak to you, especially in this market because you're so rare. Okay, so when you've got your CV, make sure you've got those top skills at the top because that's what people are going to read first and that's what they're going to be ticking off against. Okay, so nasty, individual. It's really important that you know how much you're worth in the market. So make sure you're talking to your network, make sure you're talking to recruiters. Things change very quickly in this market. Okie dokie, right, certification. So this is the bit I promised. Okay, so what does certification actually mean? So to a business, what certification means is that you have proved your knowledge in a theoretical sense. So remember, a lot of people do these certifications to validate their knowledge of the technology. Some people just do it because they're interested in learning. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that person who's certified as a Dynamics 365 sales functional consultant is going to tell you everything there is to know about the sales application, but it means that they're at least motivated and willing to learn. So they've taken the time to go and do that study and do that exam. So they've put themselves as a bar above everybody else by doing that. Okay, so really important that when you're looking at people's certifications, you're looking for the right ones. So as a functional consultant, not all the Microsoft certifications are going to be relevant to what people do. And also, these things go out of date quickly. They get updated, new ones come out. So make sure you know which ones are relevant to you. Okay, and secondly, these certifications also count towards your partner competencies. So when you're seeing companies saying, you know, they're a gold BizApps partner, that means they've got a certain number of people with a certain number of these Microsoft certifications. So if you have them yourself, you take them and associate them with a business, that's worth a lot of money to them. And it means that you're going to add yourself to the top of the pile of candidates. Okay. Cool. Right. So how to make yourself look good when people are screening your CVs. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, when you're going over your previous roles on your CV, make sure you mention your previous projects. So if you were a functional consultant 5 years at your last place, make sure you list what you did there. So what role did you take on projects? Were you a business analyst? Were you a technical consultant? Were you a delivery manager? Were you a test manager? Make sure that you list what you did. Okay. And also, if it's relevant to the job, list the client's domain. So don't breach any privacy, but if you worked on a legal application or a financial services application, list that and say what individual technologies you used as well. So did you put in the sales app? Did you put in customer service? Did you build a Canvas app? Did you build a completely custom integration with a website? List that out. It's really useful for people to know. Okay, so your CV should be short. It should be clear and concise, because how your CV reads is how your documentation that you write in your role is going to read. So really important as a functional consultant, we write documentation that has to be understandable and it has to be easy to read. So your CV is a reflection of how well you write. And that is the same for spelling mistakes and font as well. Got to make sure you put your best foot forward. All right, so certification. As a functional consultant, I'd recommend PL200 as your first point of call. So that's the first one you should be doing. It's the base of all your first-party app certifications in CE, and it's also your Power Platform functional consultant certification. So you've got a double whammy there. After you've done your PL200, I'd recommend PL100, which is your Power Apps Maker certification, and also one of the CE first-party app certifications. So that's 210, which is sales, 220, which is marketing, 230, which is customer service, or 240, which is field service. So if you do one of those and you've already got the PL200, that means you're going to be certified both as a Power Platform functional consultant and also as a CE functional consultant. All right. So once you've got those three, any recruiter is going to be ticking the box to say this person is up to date certified. Okay. And if you're recruiting, if you're looking through a pile of CVs, another tip is to look for previous certifications. So as I mentioned, these things are constantly refreshing and rolling over. So a good candidate who's been working in the field for 3 or more years is going to have certifications that are now retired. So something like the MB200, which is the previous first-party apps configuration certification that got replaced by PL200, or even something a little bit older like MB2 716, which was the old configuration exam. So if people have got a list of certifications, you know that they're really motivated to keep themselves up to date in the market. Okay. So make sure people are realistic with their remuneration expectations. So you don't want someone that's pitching themselves too low, and you don't want someone that's pitching themselves too high. And that goes for you if you're looking for a job as well. You've got to be confident and you've got to know your own worth, but you've not got to be unrealistic. Okay. So when you're on the phone with a recruiter, calm and friendly. So standard. When you're talking to these people, you're on your best behavior. So how you're talking to the recruiter is how they're expecting you're going to be talking to a client. Okay. So last one, be excited about new features and new technology. So if you've had the option to put in something cool and new in the Power Platform, make sure you mention that prominently on your CV. That's a really good tick in your box saying that you care about keeping your skills up to date. Okay. So next up, the interview. Okay, so the meat. Okie dokie. All right, so what are we doing when we interview a functional consultant? So first objective, we want to validate the candidate's skills. Okay, so what they've said on their CV, we want to make sure that that's actually true. And how we test that is by asking technical questions. Okay, so really important that we've got to have some short, snappy technical questions. So what's the answer to this with a definitive answer, but also some long form technical questions as well. So you can see how people's minds work and you can make sure that they can defend opinions. Okay, so next, we want to get to know them as a person. So having the technical skills is really important, but also how they're going to fit in with the existing team is super important. And how we know that is we want to make sure that we make the person as comfortable as possible. You want to speak to them just like you're down at the pub with them or you're having a meal with them. You want to get to know who they are. Okay, so on top of that, we also want to see how they perform under pressure. So we don't want to be super mean. Because we want people to be able to show who they are and not be too nervous. But at the same time, what we do as functional consultants can get really stressful. So if we apply the pressure just a little bit, you'll be able to see how people react to that. Okay, so last one, we've got to explain the role that the candidate's going to be doing at the business. Okay, so functional consultant means a different thing wherever we go. It's really important that you explain what that means to you to make sure that the client is happy. So you've got to communicate how the business operates, what the role is, and you've got to be honest about what you're going to offer to the client. So remuneration, number one, but also your working policy, what you expect of your team members. You've got to be upfront as early as possible about what you're offering and what you need from the candidate. Okie dokie. All right, so how do we go with these interviews? So really important that we allow the candidate to put their best foot forward. So we make them as comfortable as possible and we give them a chance to shine. So an easy way to do that when we're structuring these interviews is to have gateways. So we start off with a general introduction. So the idea here is the interviewer introduces themselves, they tell the candidate about the company, they give you an overview and the expectations of the role. So as a candidate here, you are listening and you are proving to the interviewer that you are attentive and you're interested. All right. So next one, we start off with some soft skills questions. So the idea here is to make you comfortable and to know a little bit about your personality. So this needs to be a two-way conversation. And you as the candidate, this is where you start asking your own questions. So get to know the interviewer a little bit and make sure that you're answering their questions. So you're showing here both your speaking and your listening skills. Okay, so once we've got that out of the way, then we go into the technical questions. So this third section of the interview is going to be the longest because this is what we want to prove what our technical skills. All right, so there's going to be a mix of short and long form questions. So we want some that have a yes or no answer, and then we want some kind of essay questions in an exam. So we want to hear candidates' opinions, and we want people to be able to defend them as well. So we don't want pushovers in this business. All right, and then the last stage of the interview, we turn this over to the candidate to ask their own questions. So depending on their personality, they might have some questions written down and be willing to jump in, or the interviewer might need to prompt. But it's really important here to make sure that not only you understand the candidate, but the candidate understands you and the role as well. So if the candidate leaves the interview and you're not sure that they understand what's going to be required of them, we've failed as an interviewer. All right, so even though this is the candidate's portion of the interview, it's up to you to also prompt them and make sure you know that they understand. Okay? All right. Okay, so what do we actually need to ask about in our technical session of the interview? Okay, so we've got lots of these to do. Really important one, number one important as a functional consultant, Dynamics and Power Platform. So we want to make sure that they know their stuff both functionally and technically. Okay, so they know the application of the technology, but they also know how to use it and how to configure it. So really important here, if they've referenced a particular technology on their CV, you've got to test it. So if they've specifically called out that they've worked with field service in the past, you've got to sprinkle in some technical field service questions there. And the same goes for a technology like scripting, anything along those lines. If people have put this in their list of skills, you've got to make sure you ask questions about it. Okay. General problem solving. So an easy way to test this is with an open-ended question. So you've got to let the candidate talk because you don't want to hear the answer. You want to hear their thought process. Okay, so you want to hear that they've got a logical progression of how they're thinking through and you understand their thought process. Requirement solicitation. So one of our main jobs as functional consultants is to go out and talk to clients and find out what they want and how we can put that into a solution. So a really easy way to see how good people are at this is a role play type question. So you as an interviewer would say, pretend I'm a client who's interested in customer service. Can you ask me how I would want my solution to look? And get them to do like a mini workshop, see how they ask questions, see how they draw it out of you. So here you're trying to make sure that the candidate is comfortable leading a conversation and also that they understand how to speak to people who aren't technical. So no jargon, no assuming. Okay. So speaking and listening skills, really generally. So when you're asking a question, is the candidate actually answering your question, or are they just talking our point that they've got listed on bullet points that they wanted to get across to you? So are their answers clear and concise? If you ask them a question, are they answering it and waiting for your next question, or are they just talking and talking? And are they confident when they speak? Okay, so next one, motivation and drive. So general business stuff. Really good way to ask about this is to look for honesty. So ask them about things that have gone wrong in their previous roles. Ask them about difficult projects, difficult stakeholders, and you're looking for people to admit that things went wrong and how they sorted it out. Okay. And lastly, personality and team fit. So I would say this is one of the most important things here. You've got to make sure people are comfortable. And a way to do that might be to tell a few jokes or say something about yourself. You've got to be honest and open. And if you're friendly, they'll be friendly back to you. So super important. Okie dokie. So what are some good examples of some interview questions? So I've put a few in here. I'm just going to slide everything on in here so we can see them. So a couple of examples here. So for a technical question, one I like to ask quite a lot is, what feature are you most interested in coming up? Now, I've put Wave 2 2021 in there because that's something that's come out fairly recently, but you could just as easily swap this in as what's something at Microsoft Build or Inspire that you're interested in, or what have you seen on a blog, or who do you follow on social media? So what you're looking for here is to check that the candidate's actually interested in the technology and they're keeping up with new developments. All right. So next one, what's your favorite food to cook and how do I make it? So not a technical question, but what you're looking at here is the candidate can explain logical steps in order clearly and quickly. So super important for, delivery teams and testing and UAT. So if you can give them something that they know like the back of their hand, really easy way to see if they can do this. Okay, so What's the last pathway you studied on Microsoft Learn? So this is another one of those things that checking, like, are they keeping up to date with things? Making sure people are actually invested in their work and they're actually going out and learning. So Microsoft Learn, everybody should be on there. It's the basis of your certifications, but not only that, it's a really great way to go and quickly upskill on stuff. So make sure people have got their own account and they're actively on there. Okay, so how do you describe your job to a 5-year-old? This is one I use quite a lot to check that people can clearly explain something to a non-technical person. So you're looking here to make sure that people don't assume knowledge and they don't use jargon. Yeah, so it's making sure that a functional consultant can communicate to somebody who's not in the industry, which is a super important part of our job. Okay, so tell me about a project that went wrong. This is a classic one. So what you're looking at here is the person to be honest and say that they did fail or their team failed. They understand what went wrong and they've learned from it. So if you get a candidate that says, I've never been on a failed project before, that is a big red flag. And when you're in an interview as well, feel free to admit stuff that went wrong. Everybody makes mistakes and everybody learns. Okay, so another technical one. What bugs have you come across in Dynamics or Power Platform? So this proves that someone's actually been configuring and been playing around with things. We've all found bugs, and it's interesting not only to learn how somebody found it, but what they did to get around it. So did they just raise a ticket and communicate with Microsoft, or did they come up with a creative solution to get around it and use something else? Okay, so a good meaty one that takes quite a while to explain. How do I configure security in a model-driven app? So what you're looking for here is to make sure that the candidate can name all of the elements in security that come in model-driven apps. So security roles, field security profiles, access teams, business unit structure, and you want the candidate to be able to explain how that all fits together to design and configure the security roles. Okay. So next up, a long form question. A client needs to integrate Salesforce with Dynamics 365. What technologies could we use to do that for them? So here, what you're looking for is not so much that they're going to design the solution for you, but they know about the technologies that are available and that they can give you the pros and cons of each one. Okay. So next up, a problem solving one. Without using Google, and I've put all Bing in brackets, but or any search engine. So a good way to do this sometimes is to say, if you're stuck on a desert island, how would you estimate the number of cats in your city? So what you're looking at there is for someone that can think on their feet. So it's a bit of an unusual question to be asked, but you want someone that can pivot and talk you through a logical thought process on how they might do that. So a typical answer to this is to use probabilities. So if somebody says something like, well, I've got a cat, my neighbour's got a cat, I think probably 2 other people on my street do. I would estimate the 20 streets in my district. I would estimate the 20 districts in my city. We can multiply it like that. So you want to see that somebody can take a problem that they never heard of before, turn it into pieces, and give you a logical avenue on how they might come to a rough conclusion for you. Okay. All right, next up. Once we've done interviews with clients, it's really important that you go back and rate people. So you've got your original checklist that you designed with what you want out of a client. And now we want to get to the end of the interview and see how people performed against that checklist. So this is super important when you've got different people interviewing for the same role, as we're making sure that we're comparing apples with apples. So everybody is going and checking candidate skills against what the business wants. So we also want to make sure we're doing this because we're keeping a record. So someone who isn't right for the role that you're interviewing for at the moment, the role that they're perfect for might come along the tracks a couple of months later. So if we've got this record, we can refer back to it. So if the candidate passes the interview and then you want to hire them, you can use these ratings to come up with your offer. So you can't lowball in this market. A good candidate is going to have lots of options. And lastly, if you're interviewing, we want to use these ratings, firstly, to give constructive feedback. So if a person didn't pass the interview, please tell them where they fell down and how they can improve in the future. And if you're interviewing and you don't hear back from the company, make sure you ask for this. It's real gold dust to be improving yourself in your career. Okay, so last thing I wanted to talk through is the difference between a perfect interview and a perfect candidate. Okay, so someone can really ace an interview, but not necessarily be the person that you want to hire. So when you're interviewing, you're testing them in all aspects of being a functional consultant. So you're testing their soft skills, you're testing their work ethic, you're testing their knowledge of your CE first-party apps, you're testing their knowledge of Power Platform. And in theory, you could get a person that aces absolutely everything. But if you do get that person is going to be a star. So they'll be expensive, number one. They'll have a lot of options, number two. And you've got to make sure that that person is going to fit well in your team. So secondly, a really typical personality for acing interviews is someone who's vibrant and extroverted and can answer questions and is interesting. But are they going to fit in with who works for you at the moment? So you've got to make sure that not only is that person going to be able to do your job, but they're going to fit in. So you personally, again, may click with that candidate. So you might have the same interests and hobbies and same sense of humor, but always be considering about everybody else as well. Are two of you going to be the right people to work? All right. So next up, requirements for the role. So we went back and did that checklist. Make sure you understand what you actually want versus what you've interviewed for. So if you really need a functional consultant to sit there and help you configure model-driven apps all day, and you've got, let's say, business analysts or solution architects or project managers who are actually going to interface with the clients more, is it really worth it to hire someone who's amazing in front of clients as well? And secondly, if you've got someone that you want to do a particular role, like let's say pre-sales, if you happen to get a candidate who's amazing at that, but they're also a great coder as well, are they going to get bored in that role? Are they going to stay with you? So it's really important to consider the whole package when you're interviewing. And lastly, so vibrant, extroverted people always ace interviews, but shy and modest candidates can have a lot of problems with interviews. So they might be nervous speaking, they might not feel great about aggrandizing their achievements, but they can be great team members. You shouldn't be discounting people who are nervous, who find it hard to talk about their best points. Okay? All righty. So that was a quick one. So has anyone got any questions I can answer?
So that was very informative session, Rens. Thank you so much for your time. We are so privileged. I'm sure this is going to help not only the job applicants, but the employers as well. And
I hope so.
I can see one question over here from Faraz Qureshi. So he's asking how you see user-centric design and BA skills gel with functional consultant role.
I would say it's a super important part of being a functional consultant. I would say every functional consultant should be a combination of a BA and a business application specialist. So those are the two things we do on a day-to-day basis. Now, user-centric design is a super important skill, and it's going to become more and more important. But generally, I would see that as something that goes more along with sales now. So I would say someone that understands and is great at user-centric design is an add-on to a functional consultant. So if you've got that, you're going to be a star.
So we got one more comment. So they're saying one of the best session, and
Oh,
I couldn't agree more.
Thank you.
I couldn't agree more, because I remember when I started, or most of us started the career